Welcome to the Over the Hump podcast. Your gateway to the world of the iconic Brahman breed of cattle. At BRC Ranch, our passion for Brahman cattle runs deep. Join us as we delve into the heart of this extraordinary breed, unveiling its rich history, exploring industry trends, and sharing captivating stories that define the American Brahman. BRC Ranch stands as the pinnacle of Brahman excellence in America, boasting a decade-long legacy of champions and housing the finest Brahman bulls worldwide. It's not just about cattle, it's about a legacy that reverberates across ranches and hearts. Brought to you by BRC Ranch, where the Brahman legacy thrives and stories are woven into the very fabric of ranching. This is Over the Hump.
Welcome back to the Over the Hump podcast. Today's episode is one that I've been really excited about because it brings together cattle, education, faith, and the long game of building a program that truly lasts. I'm visiting with Cyler Frost, a name you may know through Frost Farms, but also a young man whose impact reaches far beyond the pasture. Cyler was actually one of the very first recipients of a Brahman Foundation scholarship 10 years ago. And he's built a Brahman herd, and he has spent years as an ag teacher and a mentor, coaching countless students to state and national FFA championships, while quietly building the next generation of leaders in agriculture and also building a really great Brahman herd up in the Longview area. So in this conversation, we really dig into the history of the Frost Farms journey, and we talk about a belief that really resonates with me and Brandon, that it takes about 10 years of intentional work before a breeder truly begins to see the fruits of their program. So this is a podcast about Brahmans, FFA, life lessons, faith, generosity, and doing things the right way, even when no one is watching. And I think you're really going to enjoy this one. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Over the Hump podcast. And today we will be hearing the story of Frost Farms. We're very happy to have with us Cyler Frost, so welcome.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so excited to be here.
I know that a lot of people in the Brahman breed probably know you from Facebook because you're very active in the Brahman Facebook community and then also very active at the shows. We are looking forward to hearing the story of y'all's operation and just hearing the perspective of I would say, relatively new breeder and a somewhat small breeder. And that's it's always neat to hear that perspective so others in that same boat can listen and learn. And so we look forward to today's conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, if you will kick us off, at the beginning of each podcast segment, we like to just get to know the history of your operation, what sparked your interest in Brahmans, and kind of have got you to where you are now. So would you just dive off into that?
So I believe it's a 7th generation cattle rancher in Texas. Originally, we only did commercial cattle. My great-grandfather, that's all he did for a living. He raised over 500 to 1,000 head of cattle, then also had feeder cattle. He ran them all through the Sulphur River bottom and just did that for a living because he actually went to school to be an ag teacher, and he went to the principal and asked for a job, and the principal got mad. Why does everyone ask me for a job? So he said, I'm never going to ask for a job again. And he went into raising cattle. And he actually ended up having registered Herefords, which I never saw in my lifetime. And he passed away whenever I was only a few months old. But he had a son who was my grandfather that raised cattle as well and only did commercial. My dad only did commercial. I was actually the first one to have registered cattle since 3 generations back, and that was because I scrambled and caught at Fort Worth and got a Beefmaster heifer. I really wanted a Brahman, but my dad said, no, they're too high-headed, they're too crazy, I don't want one on my place. And then my ag teacher's like, you don't have the personality to fit a Brahman. And I was like, okay, that doesn't make sense, but I'll believe it. And so I just showed a Beefmaster heifer for a year. Then an opportunity came to show another heifer of a girl that just graduated, and that's how I got into the Brahman breed. I fell in love with her. She actually won Fort Worth in 2015. in the junior show. And that's where I just fell in love with that breed. She was an Elmo daughter and actually a full sibling to the Hero Bull that 007 and John Locke owns. And that's where my love began. And so my college career, I worked in the library, whether it was the overnight shift or during the day, and during the free time, I would always watch Brahman sales because I wanted to get into this breed. I'd kept up with it through the junior show perspective, and even was one of the first Brahman Foundation scholarship recipients in its first year. And so Carlos Guerrera and Mr. Mike England interviewed me. And since then, I just knew I wanted to be a Brahman breeder. I just didn't know how. And so I researched all the cells, started watching genetics. And then the next thing I knew, I was student teaching under Miss Mary Martin, who really took me under her wing and teaching me more about the Brahman cattle. And she's really good at the red side because she used to work for the Bryants and did their open show stuff with Toby Montalbano is her son, who really showed and took off their kind of ranch and showing. And so I learned from her, and then I got a phone call from my dad from a guy at work, the Schaefers in Arkansas, saying, "Hey, we have this bull that we want to sell. I know Cyler's been looking to get into Brahman." And I took an unconventional approach, and I knew they had good genetics. That was actually, this bull has an M brand on his shoulder, and it's out of Janessa, and then Mr. V8 243 over 7. And I knew how sought after those genetics were, where I was going to get that bull. And so I got that bull and started my herd from there, and then got one bred cow, then bought a few cheap heifers that I bred to him, and then started from there, where I truly only started with 3 cows and 1 bull and have slowly added and kept heifers. And we still do the commercial side of the business. I'm the only one that has registereds, but that's our family is known for more commercial cattlemen taking them to the sale barn. And I just saw how the sale barn was taking everyone's money, like where you weren't really getting a choice in what profit you got. Whether it was good or bad, you had to eat it no matter what. You had no say in it. So that's when I really wanted to dive into the registereds, just so I could have more say in that profit and decide when I'm selling it and be able to control the market better, because I saw how much toll that took on my family. It just devastated us financially, and we were having to sell and were barely able to make it. And so that's where I decided I need to find another way out of this for our family operation. So I hope that answers your question. Maybe you got too much information.
No, that was great. You might have heard my little keyboard clicking because I was like typing a bunch of stuff that I want to know more about. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you right now?
I am 28 years old.
Wow. Okay. So you've got to be one of the younger guests that we've had on the podcast. When you said you were a first year recipient of the Brahman Foundation scholarship, I guess I didn't realize that. And I should, because I was still a member of the founding board at that time. And you've got to be like one of our biggest success stories. That's awesome. So were you a senior at that time?
That was my first year in college. I came back to the All American just to interview and get the scholarship.
And that is also very interesting because, I hate to admit, I don't know exactly all the rules of the Brahman Foundation scholarship now, but I do remember when it originally started, it allowed for like juniors in high school to apply and seniors and then apparently college kids. And so that is really cool. So then you mentioned just briefly the heifer that was the champion at the Fort Worth Junior Show in 2015. Did you show that animal or you purchased her after she finished?
So I showed that animal.
So you won the champion at the Fort Worth Junior Show?
Yes, in 2015. And that's my only name to the Brahman Journal fame. I still have that copy where Silent G Ranch, Mr. Nimney, he put a advertisement in that February edition, and that's my one name to fame.
So the female was from Silent G?
Yes.
That is very impressive because the Fort Worth Junior Show is very hard to win, in my opinion.
Yes.
I was lucky enough to win it a couple of times, but like my all-time favorite best junior Brahman show heifer of all was a heifer I showed number 180 over 5. And my senior year, we were like doing TCCA jackpotting all the time. And I think I showed her something like 50 times. And in those 50 times, she was the grand champion 48 times. And she was the reserve grand champion twice. One of those being the very first year she showed at San Antonio Junior Show, like I'm talking as a baby. And then the other being the Fort Worth Junior Show my senior year. She got reserve grand champion. And that is a hard show to win. I think a couple of reasons because like it's cold always and your best heifer may not even look the best because she's hunched all up because she's freezing or she's acting a fool because she's freezing. And you can attest to this that there's like this area of junior Brahmans that live up in North Texas that maybe don't come out to all of the jackpots, and they just show up at Fort Worth and they're good. That's a very impressive feat that you have.
Yeah, and I loved always watching the baby class. We always called it the rodeo class at Fort Worth because it's the first time them getting out, them coming through that tunnel. And I remember one year of them just jumping over and hurdling the prize table.
I'm going to be honest, we don't go to Fort Worth in the open or junior show. It's because I'm like, I've had a traumatic experience in that tunnel. This was like early 2000s. And at that time, V8 Ranch did not have a herdsman. And I got put up for showing everything. And so we took like maybe like 5 or 6 head to Fort Worth. That's it. And it was me and Larry Fisher. I don't know if you know him or not. And we were like the crew. And we took one animal. The judge was Jim Sanders. Do you know Dr. Sanders?
I know of him. I've never met him.
He's very consistent in the style of judging that he does. So if I've got a moderate framed female with a really good udder, he's going to love that. So it just so happened that my dad felt like we had the exact female that he was just going to love. The problem is she had been turned out in the pasture. I mean, she was like a heifer that like started in the show barn and then got turned out, and she was living in the pasture. She had a calf at side, and we're going to bring her up to the show barn and we're going to take her to Fort Worth and you can show her. And she did not win. I could barely get her shown. And then the second traumatic experience at that show was we had 2 bulls we were showing at that time. One of them was named Tomcat, who like went on to win Houston, and the other was like a full brother. And I can't remember which one I was showing, but it was a big, massive bull, and he got stirred up going down that tunnel. And then I was showing him in the middle of that arena, and his nosebleed broke, and I thought I was going to die. I'm just going to be honest. And ever since then, I like have a mental block that I'm like, I'm not going to go out here. Immediately after that, we went to Uncle Julio's and I had 2 of those swirl margaritas.
You needed him after that.
I know, that's crazy. Do you take your kids to the Fort Worth Stock Show now?
Yes, I take my students, and usually we try to make a family trip just because I love that place so much, just from the memories, the experience, because it just feels like home every time I go there. And I'm sure that's how Houston feels for you, but that's just how I feel at Fort Worth.
I do love the Fort Worth Stock Show. If I have a chance to go and just spectate, I love it. And I love the stockyards, and it's a great show. I'm just scared to show there.
Yeah, it's something about the lights or something. I don't know what it is that spooks the heifers in the bulls. Like it just always spooks those cattle.
I guess it's like being down in that pit too. And I always feel like they can't see any daylight because it's so solid. And when you get down there, you have nowhere to like tie off. If you need to like go into the rail and just take a wrap or something, there's nowhere to do that. And that's very intimidating. I like the old show ring. Honestly, I would rather just show in there.
Yeah, as long as it's big enough for those classes, depending on how many entries you have. Because that's one thing I've noticed. They've, even in the junior show, started moving some breeds over there that are the smaller classes. And I think those breeds essentially love that ring better.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know they were using that again. That's nice.
Like I know the Charlets show there. I think the Mains do as well during the junior show.
The stands there are very difficult to get in and out of, though.
Yes, but they do have good heaters if you sit in the right spot. And it's by the best cinnamon roll place ever. So you can just grab the cinnamon roll, go sit in the heater, and just relax.
I love that. So you just breezed by your bull. You said your bull that has a M brand. For our listeners, when you say an M brand, he meant Molly, my daughter. And what is that bull's number? I have Digital Beef pulled up right now.
714/7.
714. Okay, I am looking him up because is he still alive?
Yes, he's out in the pasture. We worked him this morning.
It says he's 11 years old.
Yes.
Yeah, so this bull is, like you said, sired by B8 243 and a direct son of Janessa. There is not that many of those still in production. I don't know if there's any because the last one we had was 968 and he's passed away. He froze his nuts off in the that bad freeze we had. Literally. So we don't have him, and he would be 9 years old. I mean, I'm thinking you might have the only direct son of Janessa still in production.
That's crazy.
Have you looked into that at all?
No, I have not, because I've noticed like that Janessa genetics are usually 3 generations out with most of the sales. And so that's where I haven't really kept up with it. And honestly, we've kept him just for this long because he's always been used on a small amount of cows or heifers before we had him. Then same with us. The max he's been turned out on was 40 head for 1 year. And his entire life, he, like from commercial of our records and registered, he throws 70% heifers. So me and my wife have said we are keeping him until he can no longer breed, whether he can no longer get up, break his leg, is sterile. Like he's staying in production with those numbers because your profits are so much in those heifers.
Yeah. I I love that. I love a couple of things you said that you were like, when you see Janessa on the pedigree, it's 3 generations back. And I was just thinking about Captain. We say Captain is descendant of the Janessa cow family, which he is, but yeah, it's 3 generations back on there. And so that you having a direct son is very cool. I also find it cool that you have that 70% heifers because I track that as well. I know I was just looking at it recently, and Captain throws a high percentage of heifers. And I was looking if that's something that we think might be coming from Janessa. I don't know. I never really thought about where it's coming from.
You set me up on that whenever I did your Brahman Academy. That first year you had it out where you talked about you started doing that. And I was just like, oh. And so I started doing it and going back through our commercial records and everything else because not everything's on Digital Beef. So I went through all of our paperwork and all that because we're old timey. My dad doesn't know how to use an Excel sheet. So we went through all the records, and over the years he'd thrown 70%, and my dad used them 1 year and he kept 15 heifers out of them, and we had max 40 head. And so it was just like, wow. And so now that's the base of his herd, doing Charlet bulls, running them on that. So now we're selling those calves at the sell barn and still keeping those registered on the ones he wants, those F1 mamas. I keep, and then I also have a few commercial head that I breed F1s with, and people show commercial cattle up here on the local level, and if a kid wants one to show to get going, I kind of let them take one of those to kind of start hitting jackpots with to get their confidence under their feet.
So I was just looking it up. Captain is 75% heifers. And that's using conventional semen. Like I know a lot of people have used Captain reverse sort, but in our herd, we don't reverse sort anything. And that's on 132 head. That's not like it's on 4 head.
So what was 968s?
968, also 75%. That's very
It
interesting.
might be a Janessa.
Maybe it is. Oh, maybe it is. 160 is also from like the Janessa cow family, but he's only 47% heifer. So, but you know, he has a different sire line there too. But I think it's really interesting to track that data because, like you said, if you're marketing females, then it makes a difference.
Yeah, especially in a small operation. That's what I've noticed. Like, I also have another bull from Hudgens, Mr. Locke, that's an Elmo son, and he throws 50-50. And my dad, that's what got him to stop doing the F1 game because he was like, I can't handle the bulls that throw 50-50. They all need to be, we call him mater, and is the bull. And that's where that's who my dad wanted to always use because of his heifer percentage. And so it's crazy to think about.
We bought a Hereford bull just to use as a cleanup bull on some crossbred cows, and now I can't remember, but he was like almost 100%. But now I can't remember if it was heifers or bulls. But whatever it was not what we wanted. I think it was bulls. I think he was like nearly 100% bulls. Yeah, this makes sense because we were running a Hereford bull on Brahman cows, and our goal was to get F1 heifers, and we were getting none. It makes a difference for real.
One thing I've loved about this bull too is with that Janessa is just the udder cleanup that he passes down. I did an experiment. I kept one cow that we should have sold that had the ugliest udder. If you think of the ugliest udder, it's probably teats longer than your finger. And I was like, I want to see what it throws. And she finally had a heifer on that try, and I kept that heifer, and she had a calf at 2 years old, an F1 heifer, and just it was beautiful udder, like the Janessa typical udder. I'm like, how can you fix that in one generation? And that was just crazy to me that that's how good of an udder that Janessa line carries, and that's where I'm going to use it until I can't anymore.
Yeah, we own Janessa, but obviously we cannot take credit for that because she's JDH, Lady Janessa from the Lock Division. If people don't know the story, I had a female that I bought like for $3,000 back in the day out of the JD Hudgens sale pen named Pittman. And she was a direct daughter of Janessa. And we liked Pittman. We loved Pittman. So she's the grandmother of Captain. And then after the fact, when Brandon and I bought a bottom end set from Lock Division to expand our program a little bit, Janessa was in that group. She wasn't by any means the bottom end, but she was old.
Yes, and y'all called her Granny for the longest time, right?
We called her Granny because she was the oldest cow on the ranch. And John even said, I'm going to put her on the deal, but I don't know if she'll even make another calf. So we put her in Molly's name because Molly was just a young baby at that time. And we said, well, we'll give her to Molly and see if it works. And it did work. The maternal power from that Lock Division is really outstanding. Really, really outstanding. I love it. Let's talk a little bit about your day job because we touched on it briefly, but I have to share a fun fact. I didn't even realize you were an ag teacher, to be honest. I just thought you were a Brahman breeder or cattleman. And I was visiting with Emily Whitworth recently, and she said that you have really mentored Baxter.
Yes, I love Baxter.
Yeah, in FFA programs. And I was like, I did not even know Cyler was an ag teacher, much less like an expert level ag teacher. So tell us, about your day job and what you do and how you got into that.
Yeah, so my family is all teachers, and at first I wanted to be a nurse. I did not want to go into teaching. And I went to shadow nurses, and I went into a back surgery and I passed out. Smooth out. Granted, I did not eat anything, but I passed out and the doctor caught me. And in this Titus Regional Medical Center, as far as I know, they do not allow shadows anymore because of Cyler Frost, because I passed out. And I was just too much of a feeler. I felt too much of that shadowing a CRNA and controlling the anesthesia. I felt that too much. So I was like, I'm controlling someone's life. I don't need that in my hands. I can't do that. So then I didn't know really what I wanted to do. And my mom taught anything from Algebra 2 to AP Calculus. My mom is a math whiz. And I was helping one of my friends in class on this AP Calculus test. And I taught her everything the period before, and she made a higher grade than me on the test. And that's when it hit me that I'm a teacher. I can teach better than what I actually know myself and perform on the test. And so then I started thinking, what kind of teacher do I want to be? And I didn't want to do tested because of all the pressure and all the stigma that goes with testing that the state puts on you and just the culture behind that I didn't like. And I loved FFA growing up. I loved the cattle scene. And so that's where I started deciding that. I went to Tarleton State and got a bachelor's degree in 3 years while working at a library in a little corn maze, a Lone Star family farm. I believe it's shut down now, but I worked there. Graduated in 3 years, student taught under Mary Martin at DCAB whenever she was there for that 1 year. And then I went back for a master's because the love of my life was still in college, had 1 year left to graduate. So I completed a master's and even wrote a thesis over the emotional intelligence of Texas ag teachers. and presented it at the AAAE and got top 5 poster, and then went to teaching. I taught at Eustis for 2 years, and now I'm at Longview. And Longview has been my home for the past 5 years. I've taught at the middle school and high school, and it's just been great. I've done a lot on my note sheet, so I keep up with all of the like district champions, area champions, state champions, and even national champions, just to keep up with, because it starts getting to where I wanted to remember the kids even if I don't see the banners, because I hang up banners in my classroom that my kids win, and behind it the kids sign it. But whenever I leave, I want to know who those kids are, so I keep a note sheet on my phone of all the kids that have won those things. I have 2 national champions of proficiencies. Gracie Pitchford, who's a Gert breeder, won the Beef Proficiency Entrepreneurship Award. And then this past year with Maggie Mays, one of my Longview students, she won the Service Learning Award. And I've had 4 national finalists, and I've had 8 state champions, mainly with the record books. And then most recent success was the agricultural issues team, which is public speaking. We placed 5th in the state, talking about direct lithium extraction and just talking about the pros and cons of it. And so my main goal with teaching is to be able to get kids scholarships, because in Texas, with Texas FFA, each time you win state, whether it's a record book, an LD, a CD, or speaking event, they give you $1,000 scholarship, and that can be award money or anything like that through the foundation. So my goal is to be able to get them set up for scholarship, especially if it's not a national qualifying contest, is just to set them up. And one thing that I've learned through this is through FFA, or your junior association of the Brahman, they just, like, those kids prosper. It develops them so much for real world, just being able to speak, being able to sell cattle, being able to judge cattle, and even like filling out a record book, like with a proficiency award. It's a 20 something page application where you have to describe your greatest challenge, talk about your roles and responsibilities, your skills. You have to put in photos and everything, and those kids don't realize how much they're growing and how much they're doing until they actually have to do it and put it on paper. And just growing those kids to be successful leaders is why I do what I do. I've had a few students that have called me and just said, thank you for doing this. Even in job interview for LDEs, I had a kid, he made it to area 1 year, and he called me because now he's a fireman at, I think it's Forney. And he said that interview process was so rigorous that if you wouldn't have trained me in how to handle that and be able to do this and what to say and what to do, I don't think I would have made it. And I was in the top 6 out of over 150 applicants. And I was like, that's crazy. And he was just like, yeah, but thank you. These kids are the reason, because I never really had that quite of a mentor that helped me throughout and guided me to prepare me. I just did it myself. So that's my goal, to help those kids, even if they're not my students. Like Baxter, he's not one of my students, but he's 30 minutes away from the school I teach at. And I told Emily and Benny, if he needs help, come ask, because I will help him. Because even though my kid is the one competing, if I have a kid competing against Baxter, I don't want my kid to win just because I'm their ag teacher. I want the best kid to win that has the best operation. And that's something that I think a lot of ag teachers have, that philosophy to be able to help other kids, and especially 4-H agents, where you just got to help the kid, because they need to grow and they need to decide who they want to be and where do they want to go in life, because you never know what they can be. Like, I have no idea what Baxter's going to be. All the kids at my chapter say he's going to be the president of the United States. So that's where, like, even the seniors, like, they idolize Baxter, and he's only a freshman. And so it's just cool to see that and see the growth in those kids.
That's amazing. We have theories on what Baxter should be too. I see it as like a lawyer or a lobbyist or something, but that's still in the political realm.
Brahman breeders know, you want the finest herd? You have to start with the finest Brahman bull semen, and there's no finer selection than at BRC Ranch. Our champion makers are exactly that, but we know variety is essential. We also offer semen from low birth weight bulls, polled/scurred bulls, and sexed heifer semen. BRC Ranch works to release orders within 3 to 5 business days, but you can always stop by the ranch to pick up your order too. Bring the top Brahman sires to your ranch. Go online to shopbrcatraire.com.
How many years have you been teaching ag?
This is my 7th year.
So I just want to put this in perspective to you. Like, if we put on the same like level set of ag teaching awards and like show ring awards. You've literally won Houston twice and you've won the TJBA show 8 times in the last 7 years. That is amazing. That is so awesome.
Yeah, and these students is what does it. They listen and I just advise and go from there and help them write it and just go from there. Because if they don't want it, there's no point in me doing it. If you want success, you can have it even without speaking. You can do it without having to go to a livestock judging contest. And that's what these kids realize, and they see other success and they're like, okay, let me do it. How do I do this? And that's what's been the coolest thing.
Longview is a long way from me, so I don't know as much about like their program, but when you joined it, did they have a really solid FFA program? Or
I was hired as the 6 ag teacher, and I was the first year they started at the middle schools. And so we had about 500 members my first year. As of last year, we were the largest FFA chapter in the nation with 1,300 members, and we have 9 ag teachers.
wow, okay, that blows my mind.
Yeah, and one thing that's really cool about Longview is we have urban kids, we also have rural kids, and then suburban kids. And then we have the demographic of about 30% Black, 30% Hispanic, 30% white. And so it's just really cool to see that. And we have a barn. We also have a full meat processing facility for deer, cattle. That's a way to get us into the community in that ag processing. And then we also even have a fruit and vegetable garden behind our administration building that our students can work at during the summer to put food in our cafeterias. So it's just really cool, and urban self-sufficiency agriculture is what we're trying to get accomplished.
That's really cool. That literally blows my mind. What classes do you teach?
Currently at the high school, I teach Principles of Agriculture, Food, and Natural Resources, which is like your introduction class your first year. Then I teach Small Animal Management and Equine Science. And then this year we added the Agribusiness, Leadership, and Communications pathway. And that first level class is Entrepreneurship, which I've been doing our FFA teams, gearing it towards that. Next year it's Agribusiness Marketing. And then the next year it's Ag Communications and Research. So we're really trying to grow that agri-science fair area and trying to just grow our kids leadership wise where they have a class. Because one thing I've really noticed is a lot of these kids, whether they show animals or play sports, they have stuff to do at home and they're not getting enough family time. And so in classes, if you can create it where it's already intracurricular, FFA, any LDE, CDE, proficiency, star award, anything you do is intracurricular where it's in the TEKS. So why not create those avenues for those kids to be able to do that in class where you teaching it and have them reach that success where they don't have to spend 2 or 3 hours a week in your classroom where you're away from your family and those kids are away from their family, where that time is also valuable. Because I have 2 kids under 3 and like they're developing, they're growing, and that's where that family time is so important, just to be able to grow yourself and know who you want to be because it helps shape you.
I couldn't agree more because Molly started high school this year as a freshman, first year in ag, but just the change of her time demands, it's been really hard on our family. It's not so much from FFA because that's always been a constant in her life, like working with animals, but extra classes, and she's a sports manager. And on most days, she doesn't get home till 7 or 8 o'clock. And I'm thinking she's a 14-year-old kid. We miss like her being around. So I love that you recognize that and are working with that.
Yeah, and I had a kid that her dad was on the school board at Longview. Her mom still holds records at Louisiana Tech in volleyball. Her dad played football there, and she's the one kid that quit showing animals because she wanted to pursue sports, and she played travel volleyball, travel soccer, and she didn't have time. And I was like, where do you draw the line? Because there's so many families that are pursuing either the travel ball or the showing, or trying to teeter both, or even rodeo. And it's just crazy. So that's where that family time and spending that time with your parents and that kid, that develops you and just makes you so much like emotional intelligence, tolerable, just being emotionally stable, I would say, is having that constant presence there where you know they have my back, I love them. That to me is the biggest thing of teaching in the public school that our kids need.
I have a master's too, and got mine at Michigan State. And the actual department was adult education. My focus was ag communications, but they didn't have a dedicated ag communication, so it was in adult education. And so while we've been listening, I have Googled, and for anyone who wants to Google it, emotional intelligence of ag teacher Cyler Frost, and I have found your thesis.
My thesis.
I have found your thesis. And if you would humor me for a minute, can I read something from your abstract?
Sure.
Okay, this is straight out of the thesis. Based on the findings of this research, the study determined that in the subcategories of emotional intelligence, women had a higher emotional intelligence in overall emotional intelligence, emotional self awareness, and emotional awareness of others. So I think you have literally just proven that women are not crazy, right? Like, I love it. We have a little saying that originated from my grandpa, Sloan, WAC, and it means women are crazy. And we use it around here quite frequently at BRC Ranch. And just for the record, I'm the only woman on the team. So when they're saying women are crazy, they mean I am crazy.
Yeah, my grandfather always told me every woman's crazy. You got to pick what crazy you want to deal with for the rest of your life. That's what he told me.
It was literally, it's been less than 24 hours since the phrase women are crazy has emerged in our BRC group text, and it was about me. It was about me and Johnny Brahman's feeding schedule. That was the topic.
Hey, the next time just send that screenshot and be like, hey, it's data proven. Maybe we need to work on your emotional intelligence.
All jokes aside, this is a super impressive thesis. That was 5 years ago when like emotional intelligence was not a buzzword.
Yes, it just started hitting the education realm, but it wasn't in the ag education or agricultural world at all. And I even used an Australian survey from Genos, and we used the medium survey that was like 40 something questions, maybe 37. It's been a while, but we took it and just what really puzzled me is in the literature review. I think I talked about this, but we just it was like in Europe and all those companies that are 501 companies, I think what it is, like the top tier companies. When they got it down to the top three interviews, instead of picking which one they wanted, they had them take a Genos test. And whoever scored the highest is who they hired. And that's what they've been doing in Europe and Australia and different places like that. And I think it's even trickled into New York now and several of those Eastern huge companies that's how they decide who gets the promotion, who gets that position is through an emotional intelligence test.
Mm-hmm. That is really exciting. I just think if you had like all the free time in the world and you could do emotional intelligence analysis on the Brahman breed, that would be fun.
If I ever went to get a doctorate, what I wanted to do was somehow like get the tests of the FFA national officer candidates, the state officers that would participate at those states, and then like the local level, and just see if there was any difference. And that's one thing that would be cool to see too is like within an organization, like if we did at the ABBA, like the board of directors, the executive director, the breeders, that's something that you could see and do. And that's just curious to see where you can grow and what to do better.
We did some of those tests just for fun at Ranch House Designs, and it's very revealing, even if it helps you just understand others in addition to yourself. We talked a little bit about some of your favorite bloodlines. Can you walk us through some of the ups and downs of getting into the registered business, increasing your numbers, maybe marketing, just anything that you can share stories or advice for others that are in your similar position?
I bought the first bull. I started with a bull. I did it kind of backward than how you're supposed to. Everyone tells you to buy the cows first, then the bull. But I bought the bull first. And honestly, it kind of makes it easier because then you can bring in different bloodlines of different cows to see. And That's where don't be scared to make your own path. That's my advice, to do what God throws at you. Like, through whatever God wants you to do, make sure you do it and be obedient in that. And that's where God just kept feeding me this bull and then the cows, and just luckily I got a bull that had the 70% heifers, and we retained those heifers. And then occasionally I had students that wanted to sell their heifers, or other students at other schools, and they would ask me just because I helped them or tried to get me to sell them. And then if it was within my budget, I bought it. And that's where I've acquired some heifers. I got lucky. I bought my second and third cow, that I both bought them registered for $1,500. And that's where this man just wanted to get rid of them. It was sale barn price, and I took them. And one of them is half red, half gray, and she's still on the pasture breeding. The other one had a horrible udder, was crazy. She tried to flip our side by side, so she went to the sale barn. And it's just an experiment where you really just have to dive in and be ready for the blows. And that's where, as a commercial cattleman, we were dealt for the blows with the droughts, with the sale barn prices, where if you didn't sell them this past week, you could be losing money because they had a good sale that week and the buyers actually showed up, because we weren't shipping them to Oklahoma City. We were going to Texarkana, Mount Pleasant, or Paris. And so that's where the odds that way, like, it was just tough on my family. You just never knew how much you were actually going to get. Were you going to get enough to actually pay for even the creep feed? Whenever I was a sophomore in high school, where it was just, we couldn't even really afford to feed those steers that I was planning to show. I had to go out and buy a steer just to have that quality because of how bad the sale barn was. Be able to take the blows and just be ready. And my biggest philosophy is your genetics. Research, research, research. Watch sales of prices. So then you can trust your gut whenever you think it's a deal, it's actually a good deal. And just watch the online sales, regardless of if it's your sale or Heritage Sale or some small breeder and it's private treaty. Watch those sales and request those price lists, so then you can know what this bull is selling for, what they look like, what you're getting. And also watch the production. Go out and visit ranches. Every time I take kids down to the All American or the state show, I try and tour whatever ranches are somewhat close by, just so then they can see the cows in production and see what they're supposed to look like, see the real world. And that's where also I start asking those breeders questions on genetics, questions on, what do you do? I noticed this. What are you doing to fix that? And just having that ranchers talk and just lean on the advice of those, and find those mentors in the breed that have your best interests at heart, not their pocketbook at heart. And that's one thing I've noticed. And I think that's everywhere, even in ag teaching. Money's a big driving force. And that's where, whenever you got to rely on those mentors that build relationships, and also look into that before you buy your starter piece. Buy someone that's reputable, has the data to back it up, has the reputation to back it up, whether they're small or big, to be able to know that they will stand behind their cattle. Because I even sold one F1 heifer to a friend of mine down the road, and it's Charity Ellis. She was using it for her reset program, and turns out one of them wasn't bred. So I met her in a Pottery Barn parking lot, trailer to trailer, loaded that heifer up and wrote her a check back for that heifer. Where you need those people like that to know that they have that in your corner, where they're going to stand behind their cattle. So then you know you're not getting screwed, because that's the biggest thing, is taking that leap of faith is the biggest challenge, is to get outside your own head where you know you're making a good decision. And then once you start rolling with your small herd and you're growing, my advice is to keep all your heifers, because you know those genetics. You know what their mom did. You know what they did. If you go out and buy some other heifer and you haven't researched those genetics and seen it in production year after year, how do you know how good they actually are? Is that cow still in production at 10, 15 years old? Is that grandam still in production 10, 15 years old and having a calf year after year? What are your priorities for your program, and does it align with that? And that's my biggest advice, and why I've just bought what I could afford at the time and what fit my program. And so that's my biggest advice, is to be true to yourself, be authentically you. in your program, know what you stand for and get that. And who are you targeting? And that's the biggest thing is I love the junior show program. That's my favorite part of the breed, the industry is just having those juniors take flight. And that's where I got real lucky. I did the loaner lease deal and started out with Anna Pickering, and she got my first one. And my whole deal was if you show it for 2 years, you get the first calf, because I had one of those heifers that you never got anything out of. It was never truly yours. And then that heifer got stolen out of this guy's pasture, and she's just disappeared. And so that Fort Worth champion, I don't know where she is, never got anything out of her. And my plan was to buy her back. And I wanted to give those kids an opportunity to get something out of those heifers that they bonded with and spent so much money on feed, because feed's so expensive. And so I started the program where they either get discounted genetics or they get a flush out of that. If they only show it for a year, if they show for 2 years, they get that first calf, whether I breed it for them or someone else breeds it for them. So then they get something out of it. And that's just where my identity in our operation is gearing towards those juniors. And so that's my philosophy. And there's different philosophies that you can take. If you want to go the open show route, if you want to do production and be able to meet the commercial cattlemen, like that's where you have to look at those ranches that are meeting those industry goals that are the same as yours and go and buy your genetics from. In research, research, research. I will say one of our biggest struggles has been able to sell bulls, because we've been so focused on that junior show side of the heifers. And at first, I kept a few bulls trying to show them, sell them, and it just wasn't worth the amount of time you have to put it on Facebook Marketplace. It wasn't worth the time of the feed, the energy, where I started taking them to the sale barn. And now I'm trying to get into the beef where you can actually sell it. And so that's my goal now, to move towards that, to see, okay, what can happen if I do this? Because what's the worst that's going to happen? If I can't sell the meat, I have to eat it. And if it's only 1, 2, 3 bulls and my family eats it and we save the money that way, then so be it. And so that's where I'm trying to see what is the best fit for my operation in my area. And that's where you have to take that into accountability. You know that you're going to get hit in the face. You know that a calf is going to die here. You know what's going to happen. You know the worst that can happen. So how do you prepare? How do you get up? And how do you manage? And I think that's one of the biggest things with small breeders that are just getting started is they're going to come, but give it time. And one of the best advice from your Brahman Academy I got is, like, y'all said it took 10 years for y'all to start to make profit and start feeling like y'all are making headway. And that's where, like, I believe that, because I'm in year 7. Yeah, year 7 of actually raising cattle, or 8. I think it's year 8 of buying, 7 in production of registered Brahman. And so that's where I can start seeing the fruition of it. And my family's already been having fruition of commercial cattle. And I strongly believe that 10-year mark in growing is when you actually start seeing that fruition. And you just can't be afraid to take risk and be able to stand beside them and have those people in place to support you. I think that's my biggest advice.
Cyler, in hearing your story, it's very aligned with Brandon and I's story. I mean, yes, we're different in other ways, and yes, my grandpa owned V8 Ranch, but we started young too. And I really like how you said buying what you can afford. And you talked about like buying some junior show heifers and stuff. That's how I got the 98 cow, which is the grandmother to Noble. I bought her from a girl that was finishing up showing at the All American. I bought her for $5,000. And I mean, that was 15, 17 years ago, something like that. I don't know. So times are different now, but that was a good buy. And I can't remember how much we paid for Janessa, but it was market value. And I remember that because the locks had said, we don't know whether she's going to give you a calf or not. And they priced her at a fair price. And it goes back to saying, like, do business with people. They priced Janessa at a price that, hey, if we have to take her to the auction barn 6 months from now because she never had a calf, they didn't screw us. It goes back to what you were saying about doing business with people that truly want to help you, not necessarily their pocketbook. There's so many similarities there. And I think it's good to talk about this because unfortunately, a lot of times in the Brahman breed, we do hear about those stories where people got burned. You hear it a lot. I don't have to repeat them because we've all heard them. And it's good to point out that there are still good people in the breed that want to help others. Your point about giving a junior, giving them the first calf or a flush, you do realize that's not standard for what a lot of people do. Right?
Yes. Yes. And that's why, like, I created it because the one that won Fort Worth that I had, she was a loner that way. The girl just graduated and they were like, you had this piece of crap beef master. We weren't the richest family because of the droughts and all that were coming on. So that scramble heifer that I got, I bought her for $500. And that's how much the scramble certificate was. And they saw my work and then they lent me that heifer. Two calves in, and I went and saw her every time I was home from college. Like, I had that bond with her, and whenever she won Fort Worth, she knew she won Fort Worth before I did because we were sitting there waiting at the senior champion after we'd been named that. I'm sitting there talking in the stands, passing up the prizes to one of the show parents, and she just headbutts me. And I'm like, what the heck is going on, Truby? What are you doing? And I look at her, and the judge is staring at her. She's like, why are you not showing me? Why are you not showing right now? And so I started scratching her and showing her. But she was a competitive cow. I remember her last show was Texas Junior Brahman show, and she got third and she was last. And I remember just taking her straight to the stalls, and she could have led herself straight to the stalls, and she put her head in timeout, and like you would have thought her dog had died and she was crying. That's her personality that she had. And I went and saw her all the time. And after she got stolen after she had her second calf, I couldn't put a junior through that after me going through that. And that's where I needed to do something to create a system where they have something they could get back, whether that is discount genetics, whether that's a flush, whether that's after showing it for 2 years, after you spent $5,000-$6,000 at least on feed, you get a calf out of that because feeding is nearly just as expensive as buying a cow. And that's where you just got to give back because if not, what are they fixing to do? How do you know you're setting that kid up in good hands with giving them this heifer that you don't know if it's going to win? You don't know what it's going to do. And honestly, even if it does win, what does it do for the kid? The only show that really does good for the kid is San Antonio, where they get a scholarship. Other than that, they get a trophy, a few banners, some buckles. They get that experience. But does anything actually help offset that cost? And that's where I've tried to do that just to help. And we've modified it and done different things. And me and my wife have talked about it and prayed about it and just we do what's best for our operation and that kid, and we have that conversation with the family and just be like, we're not your typical place that if you want to show and grow and you don't want to spend the money because it's your first time, you don't know if they're going to like it, try this is the system we have in place.
I'm not a person who can like quote a lot of like exact scriptures, but I do know there's like a scripture paraphrasing that's basically says, give and it will be given to you.
Tenfold, I think, is what it is.
Okay, yes, yes. And it basically is like the more you give, God's going to give you more. And my friend Garrett Harvey, we share a lot of like motivation and stuff with each other. And he was like telling us that you cannot outgive God. If you give to others, you're going to be blessed in other ways. I just really love y'all's mindset on that. It's so kind and truly is about helping the kids.
Yeah. And even if it's a rough season, like you're not having the calves or you have all bulls, look back and reflect, what is God trying to teach you in this hard season? That's one thing me and my wife have really talked about, just with everything going on in our life. What is God trying to teach us in this moment? Because I know things aren't going our way, but what is the fruitation in the future? Because our God's a good God. So what is it? What is going on? What's happening here? And that's where you just have to trust and pray and know He's got you. And that's where I've been very blessed with the kids that have come through our Frost Farms program that have helped and showed cattle. And I still have I think, a pretty good relationship with those kids. They still call or text, or some of them will even ask, hey, what about this genetics? What about this? What do you think of buying and doing different things like that? And one thing I always tell the kids too, just with our stuff, if I ever sell them, whether it's culling or like they just got a bad temper now because they had a calf and something happened, like I tell those kids that showed that animal, if I'm getting rid of them, I'm calling you first. I'm giving you a first option because you have that bond. And if I took it to the sale barn when you wanted it, I'm going to feel bad. That kid's going to think crap of me. So that's just where creating those relationships and just making sure that you have everyone's best interest at heart.
What is your favorite show that you go to? Is it Fort Worth?
Honestly, yes, that's set every year. I love the all-American atmosphere and everything that goes into it with the kids. But my favorite all-American is just going to the Texarkana whenever it's there because it's so close to home for me. And I grew up going to the Four States Fair. So when the all-American's there, that is my all-time favorite just because it feels like home. I get to see all the cattle I love, see the best cattle in the nation. And it's just like a kid in a candy store. So that's the way I feel whenever I'm there. And I have different shows that I like for different reasons, but that's the main thing.
We really like the Texarkana facility. I mean, we like Brian always, but I like Texarkana too. It's good. Earlier, we were chatting. I was asking you about the animal that I thought had won at San Antone, remember? And I was wrong. I know what animal it is now. It was a female you raised that was first in class at the TJBA, and Margaret was second. That is what it is. Different heifer. Oh, okay. But you raised that heifer, right?
Yes, yes. And that's actually a Janessa granddaughter.
Okay, that's the one I was thinking of because I knew we were like recently at a big show and it was an animal that you raised that had done well.
She beat Coming in Margaret, and I was shocked. Like, I was shocked.
Well, I was not shocked. I'm going to tell you because in that, so Todd Thrift was the judge, and he's one of those that's sort of like Jim Sanders. You know what he likes. And in the class ahead of Margaret's, he used a pair to win the class, and he said, I'm using this pair solely because she's in production and nothing else is. And then I'm standing back there in the makeup arena, and I just kind of make a quick glance around, and I saw your calf who was a pair. And I was like, well, the best we can hope for now is second.
Yeah, I was wondering, is he going to eat his words and use this heifer? Because she's one of the best heifers I'd ever seen, whether she's in production or not. And that's where that cow, like, she was one of my favorites. She came off a cow that I bought from Jennifer Parker. Her mom, Trisha Collins, bought it from her as a bred heifer. And that was her third or fourth heifer calf. And she's out of the mater bull. That's the Janessa son in that udder. And that's where I was like, okay, if we have a time, it's now. And she had that calf right after she was 2 years old. And that kid that was showing her bought that calf from me at a discounted price with our loaner program that she had because she showed it only for 1 year, and she still has that calf and it's just now getting bred. And so it's just really cool to see it come full circle. But that's the first time I'd ever won the state show class. I'd won an All-American, I'd won Houston, and a San Antonio class. I still haven't won a Fort Worth class though. That's the one major I haven't touched in classes yet.
Do you have anything coming down the pipe that is competitive?
I have one little heifer that I loaned out to a former student's sister that I really like, but she's the only one that's got a chance. And it's funny that this heifer kind of deals come at you. That heifer's mama was actually a Christmas present from my wife that she bought from the Schley's. So it was one of Sydney Sly's old show heifers that they were culling out because they're going a different direction or just needed more room, running out of pasture space. And my wife bought it as a pair, and that was her first calf that she had out of my Janessa son. I just like her. I look at her, and the more I look at her, the more I like her. It's been a few years since I had one of those heifers, since the Wicked is what I call her, the Anna Pickering senior year show heifer that won so much. And I just could stare at her for days.
So, moral of that story: listen to your wife in cattle breeding. Oh, that's awesome.
Definitely, because she shocked me on that one.
This has been one of our best podcasts, and we've talked about things that are different than just solely Brahman breeding, and I love that because what I find in our breed is that Most everyone has a really great story to tell if you just take the time to get to know them. And the person stalled right across the aisle from you at a show may be someone that could be your best friend if you just take the time to spend some time and get to know them. So when we wrap up, I know if you've listened to the podcast, we always like to wrap up with what is your favorite Brahman animal of all time? I think I might know some that might be in your top three, but give us your answer.
I think my top one, that's the Janessa cow. Even though I never laid eyes on her, never saw her, and that's one if I could go back in time and see. I would love to see that cow. I'd love to see her throughout her life. Not like I'd love to see her when she was born, then weaned, and then 2-year old, and then having calves like in production. I would just love to see that evolution of that cow, just to see all her parts and her story he is telling even on my operation, and no telling how many other ranches, but it's just cool to see that. And that's where I love to see that in my own cattle is the story they tell and just taking those pictures and those mental images of them growing and those personalities, where she has to be my number one. My number two would have to be the Elmo bull. He is one of my all-time favorites, partially because the one I showed was a daughter of him, but he just has stamped a legacy on the breed that I think is unmatched, because the only one I could think to possibly match the stamp of legacy on the breed is Noble, but Noble is an Elmo son. So that's where it's still Elmo's legacy. And so that's where he just has changed so much. And that's where they're my top two. And probably my third would have to be that heifer that came out of the bred heifer from Trisha Collins, that we call her Wicked. It's Anna Pickering Schroeder, and she's out of that Duke bull that they bought in y'all's last, I think, V8 sale, the dark pigmented bull that was a little high-headed. It was out of him, and she just has bone for days. If I had to draw up a perfect broody cow, she is the image, and she's had calves as tight of a window as 300 days, I believe, according to Digital Beef. I think it's a little more than 300. And then she's gotten sick, and you go through all those limbos of that, and then having bulls. And I'm just like, okay, I need you to have one. But if I had to draw a perfect cow, I love the bone, I love the brood, I love the volume. Then she had the perfect amount of muscle to go into it. She just is a perfect cow in my eyes. And that's where I've kept one of her daughters, and I'm praying for another daughter out of Mater before I have to retire him. That's what I'm hoping. I need another daughter out of that, and hopefully one that looks like her with his temperament and that dark pigment and just that Janessa qualities tying into her qualities. That's my dream. And then I have the perfect cow altogether.
I was just looking up Janessa on Digital Beef, and I actually don't even have her picture on there. But do you know what her picture looks like?
I've seen it on your website, and like, yes, it's very grainy.
Yeah, it's like totally decrepit. And I remember when we took that one, I think she was like 17 years old. And I took it because Brandon took it, but we had so much of her influence in our herd, but people were like, who is this cow? And so we felt like we needed a visual representation. But she's like a body condition score 2 at that time. And I remember getting into a disagreement with my dad about it because I wanted any picture. I don't care exactly how it looked, but his advice was we should not put that picture out because it's not a very good picture. But I still think people like to see at least some type of visual, even though it's not a great picture by any means.
Yeah, and I think that's a difference in a opinion, where some people only want to see that model profile like you see on Facebook and that they share, and other people want to see the real authenticity. And that's where I don't mind seeing those ugly pictures, because if they're ugly, okay, it doesn't fit my bill. But also at 17 years old, tell me who looks good at 100 years old as a person, because you're not going to think you look good and like a supermodel. And that's where I think you need that context, and just to be able to look and see, because I love seeing photos whether they're ugly or not. And that's where whenever some of my photos that I put on Facebook aren't the best of some cattle, they might be looking off or eating out of a hay ring or a calf coming up to me. But To me, if you really want to buy it and you really want to come look, you're going to come see it. You're going to come see the product that we're putting out. And that's where even a video doesn't do justice. A photo doesn't do justice. If you're really going to spend the money that Brahman cattle cost, you need to come out there and see them. You need to be a reputable person or breeder that you have. And that's where you just got to go out there and see. But I love seeing the photos that aren't picture perfect, because that tells me also it's not photoshopped. Like, you can tell that it's true, that someone took a cell phone picture. And I know there's been a few breeders that brag about this cell phone photo, this cell phone video out in the pasture. And I'm like, okay, we've come to a state in the industry where we have to brag about that. Like, that to me is what bothers me, where I don't mind those bad photos if they're not going in a magazine, because that's everyday life. There's not every day I look great. I promise you, I look like a beat up horse some days. Take me out and feed me, please. I'm starving. Like, it's just life.
Hence the reason this is just an audio podcast, not a video podcast.
Exactly.
It would be cool. I don't know. You know how you see these AI things where it takes people and AI makes it like age them or make them younger? It would be cool if we could do that with Janessa. I don't know if I could find some like animal aging thing and do it.
That would be cool. And that's where I wonder if you could do even ChatGPT, put in her picture, then say, okay, here's direct descendants of her, like where they're half, here's some that. Can you picture what this cow would look like at this time, and just be fun? And I've always heard, Gwen Welty has always told me that whenever you see a calf at 2 months old, that's how they'll look in 2 years. And that's been true to me. If you take photos and ask ChatGPT to age them, what could you accomplish? What could it tell you about it? How good could it make them?
I'm doing that as soon as we get off.
But that's something I'm fixing to do, just to see and compare. Or could it even do matings for you? That's interesting too. Could that be a new segue to take matings with ChatGPT? Putting in, come again, Margaret, with a bull you're wanting to try, and let's see what it looks like.
I don't know if ChatGPT would do it, but maybe some of those more graphic intense AI programs could totally do it. That would be amazing.
That would be cool, and take a next level up on breeding, where you could actually see some of that. That's crazy to think about.
So, last thing before we sign off, tell our listeners what's the best way for them to kind of learn more about you if they want to reach out to y'all for cattle or anything. How do they find you? What's the best way for people to contact you?
So we have Facebook with Frost Farms. There's another Frost Farms that's up in Missouri, Nebraska, somewhere like that. Look for our Ranch House Designs logo. It has like a JF brand with a Brahman coming out of it, and it says Frost Farms. You can also friend request me on Facebook. I usually don't turn Brahman people or any agricultural people off of Facebook, so they can find me at Cyler Frost. I'm on LinkedIn through Cyler Frost, Facebook, that. You can email me. It's my name, Cyler Neil Frost at gmail.com, and Neil is Neal, and then Cyler Cyler. Like, it's easy to reach out to me that way. And if you have a lot of questions, I'm going to end up giving you my cell phone number, because I don't keep up with Facebook or anything the best, where I'm just going to be like, text me or call me, because that's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Yeah. Well, guys, you have heard it there. And again, thank you so much. This has been a great episode. So thank you for all your time, and can't wait to see you again soon.
Yes, thank you, Rachel.
You've been listening to the Over the Hump podcast. Our passion is Brahman cattle, and it runs deep. And this show is about its rich history, industry trends, and stories that define the American Brahman. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram and Facebook at BR Contraire. See you next time on the Over the Hump podcast.